Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day. All Bills, all the time. And now Matt Bove and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
Okay, what a day it's been. The Bills have hired a new head coach. He's a familiar face. Joe Brady becomes the 21st head coach in Buffalo Bills history. That includes a couple of interns along the way. Interns, I should say. Interims head coaches along the way. Not interns. And Lou Saban, who had 2 stints. Matt Bove was going to Toronto tonight to cover the Sabres game against the Leafs. You had to do kind of a 180. Did you ever actually get on the road to Toronto before this happened? What happened with you?
No, Dom Tibbetts was going to scoop me up on Grand Island on the way to the Lewiston-Queenston Bridge, and everything was planned and ready to roll. And then at 11:30, 11:45, whatever time it was, the news drops that Joe Brady is getting hired, and that completely threw a wrench in the day, which understandably so. Listen, this is massive, massive Buffalo sports news, and now we are here to talk about it. And it was a move that I was very surprised by, Sal. This was not something that I thought they would do. I thought that they would hire outside the organization. So the fact that we're talking about Joe Brady getting this promotion was not how I thought this podcast was going to go. I knew we would do the podcast whenever they hired their next head coach to talk about that decision. I did not think it was going to be personally. I didn't think it was going to be Joe Brady. That doesn't mean it's a mistake. It's just not what I thought was going to happen.
Okay, so a little peek behind the curtain earlier today. Matt did call me and say, hey, do you think they'll hire a coach today? Because if they do, we got to do a pod. And I said, I don't think they will, because even though Schefter said by Wednesday, it seems a little presumptuous. It seems a little ambitious to do that right now. It felt like the Bills were kind of taking their time. And then especially with the Kubiak thing, you kind of always felt that maybe they were going to wait on that, although it would have been tricky to do that. But man, it just felt a little bit early to do that. And I said, I think you're good to go to Toronto. And then suddenly I'm actually on my radio show on WGR Sports Radio 550. I have Carlo Koliakovo on, who used to play for the Sabres and the Leafs. And while we're talking, the news drops at 11:45, essentially, that the Bills hired Joe Brady. So then we get to work and say, okay, we got to digest this. We have to talk about it. And part of the reason for me was saying to you, I think you're okay, is because I was surprised. A, that they did it. 2 things. The timing of it surprised me. I thought it would take a little longer. And I'm also surprised about Joe Brady. I agree with you. Look, Terry Pegula said last week at the podium that the reason that they moved on from Sean McDermott was because the Bills hit what he called the proverbial playoff wall. When he said that, my thought was, okay, that means you're probably going in a different direction, a new voice, a new direction to kind of give that a clean slate, so to speak. I did not think it would be a promotion from within to somebody who is in a leadership position who also was a part of hitting the proverbial playoff wall.
Yeah.
I also felt there was always a chance Joe Brady could get it as long as Josh Allen endorses it, right? That was always the fly in the ointment to the first theory. So I agree with you. Promoting from within did not seem like what they were going to do based on his messaging.
The word that I've kind of stumbled on today, and actually somebody commented this as well, I think it's an uninspiring hire. That doesn't mean it's going to be a bad hire. It just feels like there were other names out there that I think would have gotten people more excited. That doesn't, like I said, Joe Brady, the thing I want to know, and this is something that I posted earlier today, is that when the offense looked stagnant and stale, how much of it is what Joe Brady wants the offense to look like, and how much of it was Joe Brady coaching the offense and calling the offense like he knew Sean McDermott wanted it to look like, because he's ultimately the head coach. And if you don't think that's a valid thing to bring up, I would just point you to when Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator here, and it felt like there was a disconnect at times between how the offense was supposed to look with Sean McDermott, or how he wanted it to look, and what Brian Daboll wanted the offense to look like. So I feel like that's something that I want the answer to, but I don't know if I will have the answer to that until they start playing games. And even that sample size won't be large enough, because a lot of it will be based off of who they're playing against and what the game plan that specific week looks like. If we were having this conversation today about Grant Udinski, I think a lot of people would be really, really excited about the promise and the unknown that comes with that. I think Joe Brady is more of a known commodity, and we know that the quarterback likes playing for him. But that same quarterback also endorsed Ken Dorsey at one time. And that same quarterback also apparently vouched for Keon Coleman before he was drafted. So I don't think that Josh Allen's say is the end-all be-all. I'm sure it's a good thing that he likes having Joe Brady as his coach. And I think that there is reasons to be optimistic about it, but not many reasons to be excited about it.
We want to just thank everybody who's joining us here on the live pod. If you're watching, thank you very much. Over on X at Sal Sports, also at Matt_Bove. On YouTube at Sal Sports, we've hit 15,000 subscribers. We thank you very much. Yes, Matt looks like he is great head coach himself. He just came off TV. He's wearing the suit. If you're on the video side, yeah. I am wearing a hoodie and I am in Studio Capaccio because I've been doing a lot of these kinds of things all day, getting on podcasts and radio stations talking about the Buffalo Bills. So yes, we're in a much different look from each other today because we've had a lot of different things going on. So we appreciate you. If you are listening to us, thank you very much for downloading and subscribing. Very valid points about Josh Allen and his thoughts about this whole thing. And since it's come out, we've heard, hey, Josh was in the initial interview process. He did not, he was not a part of paring down the finalists or anything like that. So now we're getting messaging that, okay, yeah, Josh wanted to see how it all happened. He was able to kind of be a part of that process, but this wasn't his call, and it shouldn't have been his call. That said, there's no way Joe Brady gets this job if Josh Allen doesn't feel at least comfortable with him, if not outright endorse him.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that they're making this move unless Josh Allen is like, hey, I think that there's reasons to promote this guy. I think there's more that this offense can unlock under the leadership of Joe Brady. I believe that to be true. At the same time, though, why at times did the offense look stale and too predictable? And that's, I think, valid. Like, they scored the 4th most points in the NFL this year, but they've also, in the last 3 games where they have been eliminated from the playoffs with Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator, had the ball with a chance to win the game in the final minutes, and every time they have fallen short. And you can point to specific moments in all of those games where you can find somebody else to point the blame at. That's fair. Tyler Bass misses a kick. Chris Jones blows up a play in the divisional round, and Josh misses Shakira in the back of the end zone. And then there's the Dalton Kincaid pass that he didn't catch in the AFC Championship. Or even in this instance, the Brandon Cooks pass that I thought was a catch that wasn't a catch, and it was a bad call. But they still fell short in all of those games. I don't think Joe Brady bears all of the blame, but he bears some of it. So the fact that they did stay in-house after hitting the proverbial playoff wall that Terry Pagula mentioned was surprising to me. It was also surprising to me that they interviewed 9 candidates and that we never heard about a second interview. Like, they were doing a first interview with Shieldhouse last night on what was that, Monday night. And then Tuesday morning, this news drops that it's Joe Brady.
Never got around to a first interview with Kubiak because they weren't allowed to do that. Joe tweets in and writes in, shouldn't Allen have a press conference after all this? He will. We will hear from Josh Allen, I believe, right? That was the plan that we were told.
I think we're going to hear on Thursday.
Okay, because we want everybody to know Joe Brady will have his introductory press conference on Thursday at noon. Matt will cover it on the TV side at WKBW. I'll be on the radio side on WGR. Okay, let's get into that then for a second, because you mentioned something really interesting about, you know, the offense and where it is and him and the offense having the ball and the different kinds of things that happen. How much of the Bills offense under Joe Brady was Joe Brady, or was it Sean McDermott's directive to Joe Brady? That's been a question going back a couple of years now. Where do you lie on how many changes or what changes could happen to the offense? Or no, that's Joe Brady's offense, and that's what we're going to keep seeing.
Well, I also want to know, too, I'm not going to answer the question specifically because I think the other factor to answer the question is the personnel that they have had at their disposal and what that looks like moving forward. Because I think the offense changes with a better wide receiver group. But I don't think it changes with one great wide receiver, because they had one great wide receiver when Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator in the second half of 2023, and it was Stephon Diggs. And his numbers dropped, but the overall offense's numbers rose. And that's when they kind of adopted the whole everybody eats mindset. And that's something that they stuck with in 2024. And they had, you know, a modicum of success kind of with that mindset. And then this year, you know, the wide receiver concerns were just so pressing and they were so poignant. So I think this is what the offense, I think this is more of the offense that Joe Brady has envisioned and what he wants it to look like, a very balanced attack. But I also do think that he could do more if they make improvements specifically in the passing game, because that's been a notable absence for them.
We know a lot of you are going to want to watch the Sabres at Leafs game tonight, so we're going to make sure we try and get you out of here right about when that game starts. So we appreciate you coming aboard and being a part of this discussion. So one of the things that's come out after this, and going back to last week's press conference, when Brandon Beane, said we're looking for a CEO type. It's not just a play caller job. And then after Joe Brady's hired, we are told by some of the national reporting going on, here's why Joe Brady got it. And CEO type kept being mentioned, CEO type. So clearly the Bills are, saying, hey, this is the guy that kind of checked that box for us. Okay. You and I have gotten to know Joe Brady really well. For us personally, this is a guy that we know, right? We can kind of move forward with, hey, we already know about him a lot. We have a relationship with him established. With that relationship, though, do you think Joe Brady has come off as the CEO type to run an organization?
From the outside, I wouldn't have immediately pegged him as that, but I also know that how they act behind closed doors is completely different than how they act when we are present. And that's to be expected, right? Like, what they're saying in their meetings and how they're acting in the locker room is very different than how they're acting in a press conference when they're trying to be coy and they're not trying to show their hands too much. So I would have even said, hey, I think Babbage is more of that guy than Joe Brady ultimately is. But that's that's just an observation. I can't fully say that with the 100% confidence because I don't want to pretend like I know what happens when I'm not in the building 3 or 4 days a week. I know that they really like him. And I really do feel that to be the case because I went back and I found a bunch of interviews that we used on the news tonight about like players talking about Joe Brady. And there was one from Dawson Knox last week and he was just glowing about Joe Brady. And then there's been multiple times where Josh Allen has had to advocate for him. But he's advocated for him because there has been criticism about him. So that's why it's so interesting to me that he was promoted, because I think you could have just as easily had the conversation that they're moving on from Joe Brady as opposed to promoting him and making him the head coach. I mean, what has happened this offseason just very plainly is one person has been demoted and 2 people have been promoted. The person demoted is Sean McDermott. The people promoted are Brandon Beane and Joe Brady. And I think those are 2 people who have caught some criticism over the course of the last several months. And now they're getting bigger roles with this team.
In his 2 years as the full-time offensive coordinator, the Bills have finished 2nd in points scored and then 4th this year in points scored, 10th in yards, 4th this year in yards. I mean, really impressive numbers, but a lot of people can just point right to, hey, you got number 17, you got Josh Allen, you could put a lot of people in those roles, in that role, and that would happen. But obviously those results for Joe Brady are going to speak for themselves when he walks into, an interview. And not only that, he's going to say, look, Josh Allen was an MVP without Stephon Diggs when I was the offensive coordinator. These are boxes that he totally checks. The other thing that you have to think about here is what he's going to do on his staff. We've already been hearing reports. Adam Schefter has reported Jim Leonard, the Denver Broncos pass game coordinator for the defensive side, is in line or a leading candidate to become the Bills' defensive coordinator. Now, when I see that, I say, okay, here's my take, Matt. What's the one thing that's really held the Bills back on defense in the playoffs over the last several years? The one thing on defense.
The lack of pass rush.
The lack of getting to the quarterback. Immediately, Joe Brady gets hired, and the first name you hear is a guy who, A, has been on a staff that's led the league in sacks the last 2 years, and B, played for and learned under Rex Ryan. Vance Joseph and Rex Ryan, 2 very, very aggressive fronts. Schematically, they want to get after you. They want to sack the quarterback. Very aggressive. We've heard a lot of rumblings about roster versus coaching, not being aligned, Sean McDermott not having what he wants. I think, to me, this speaks to Brandon Beane believing, for right or wrong, we can say this, and we'll see how it pans out. Hey, I've invested resources in that D-line. This D-line should be able to get to. The front 7 should be able to get to the quarterback. They are not getting to the quarterback. Joe Brady gets that message and says, I'm going to get a guy who can help that group get to the quarterback.
Yeah, I think that would be a hire that I think would inspire a lot of confidence in people because it feels like he is a rising star in the coaching ranks. Like the minute you hear about the Jim Leonard news, I think a lot of people are quick to be like, wait, Jim Leonard, the former Buffalo Bill? And it's like, yeah, that guy, but somebody who has been cutting his teeth in Denver with a really successful defense the last couple of years and who is ready to take this next step. It's convenient because they're on the same staff, but Jim Leonard is to the Broncos defense as is Davis Webb to the offense, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I said that the right way, but
Sure.
you catch what I'm saying.
I mean, you could still even go dip back into that Denver pool and get another guy named Davis Webb on the other side of the ball. We'll get to that in a second.
You know what? But they fired their offensive coordinator today. So now it feels like Davis Webb is going to naturally be promoted to, be retained there. But yeah, no, I think
it could be a way to keep him in the building by firing.
That's what I think it is. I think it's like almost like we need to do whatever we can to keep you in the building, and we know that you're out otherwise. So we're going to fire our offensive coordinator, and we're going to make you our new offensive coordinator. So listen, that's sidebar conversation. Yeah, the Jim Leonard one. What I think the reason that would inspire confidence in Bills fans is because when I say the Joe Brady thing is uninspiring, it's because partly it's another familiar name that we know staying here, and that would at least show something changing. I think people would lose their minds if Joe Brady was the head coach and they ran it back with Bobby Babich as the defensive coordinator. And that's not even really meant to be strictly a knock on Bobby Babich. It's just like, if you want change and you're looking for some staff to get you over the hump, how do you plan on doing that with just completely running it back? So I think Leonard would be, a slam dunk hire.
Yeah. So we would anticipate that means Bobby Babich is not being retained. Once you start hearing these things, that would make sense. And then obviously on the defensive side of the ball, you're probably going to have maybe more changes than you will on the offensive side, because there's guys here that have been here for a long time, including with Joe Brady, who he's had success with on offense. Now, Kelly Skipper was brought in by Sean McDermott in 2017. Rob Boris was brought in by Sean McDermott in 2017. They've been here a long time. They've also worked under Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator, had success. I don't know what's going to happen. I would not be surprised if those people are not retained. Adam Henry might be a little different deal. Wide receivers, Keon Coleman situation, maybe you're looking at a change there. We'll see where that goes. Interesting on the offensive line, we already knew that Aaron Kromer was retiring. Austin Gunn is his assistant. I think that he's going to get a very serious look at being the new, offensive line coach. And then you have Ronald Curry, who I think very well could rise to maybe the next offensive coordinator, because remember, he's been with Brady going back to their Saints days. Brady basically kind of brought him to Buffalo, the relationship there, to become the quarterback's coach. So if it's not Davis Webb, maybe it's a Ronald Curry. But either way, what we do know, Matt, Joe Brady's going to keep calling plays. That's been reported tonight too.
Yeah, that's been reported by Mike Garafolo. Listen, I think that nailing the defensive coordinator is so much more important than the 100%. Offensive coordinator, just because obviously if Joe Brady's going to continue to call plays, that's not to mean that that's not an important role, because it is, and that person will work in unison with Joe Brady. But I think having somebody who can kind of take control and oversee this defense will take that, I don't want to say off Joe Brady's plate, but it'll be one less thing that he needs to worry about. It's almost like when Sean had Brian Daboll, and I think Sean had, a lot of say everywhere, but like, you knew Brian Daboll was taking care of the offense. Like, Dabes, go do your thing, and I'm going to focus really on what I got to do and more on the defensive side of things. So he's got to nail this defensive coordinator position. And I do think it's funny, because I do think like the perception today amongst the fan base is a sense of frustration, disappointment. I would say that's probably more prevalent than the people who are excited about this. But I think you could be quick to see that flip with a Jim Leonard if he's hired, and with a couple personnel changes that I think they ultimately will make. Like, I think this team has to have an influx of talent, specifically probably in the wide receiver room, and maybe a couple guys on defense as well.
It's interesting you say that, because Pitzer, who by the way is a really good, not only follower, but he subscribes to me as well. I appreciate that. Pitzer says, I never want to hear everyone eats again. Well, here's the bad news, Pitzer. I think you're going to hear it, because Joe Brady kind of invented it with Josh Allen. It was, it was on the heels of having Stephon Diggs and the weight of maybe feeding him the ball and having this number one receiver. It's like, we don't need that anymore. We're going to basically use everybody we have at our disposal. And it was everybody eats. I think you're going to hear everybody eats again. I think it's a Joe Brady thing.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think that should be the mantra. I think you want to have one person who can feast, and that can be a wide receiver one that is currently not on this roster. And then, like Khalil Shakir can get the appetizers and James Cook can get the dessert, but like there needs to be one person. And I think that is James Cook, right? I think that with this decision, we will see a lot of similarities next year that we saw this year. They're going to lean into the run game. They're going to utilize their tight ends. But the tight ends have been, especially Dalton Kincaid, have been unavailable. And that's a concern, especially if they have to decide on his 5th-year option. I think he'll get it, but you can make the case like you haven't been available and we've needed you to be available for the entire season. So yeah, I think that they've got some big decisions. Did you just pop up a question about the wide receivers?
I didn't. Someone did. Maybe that was Mike. I put
Yeah,
it.
hi, Mike.
It says Mike, our producer, I think put it up there. Is there anybody you'd target specifically? Look, I haven't dug through the UFAs that much. I do know Juwan Jennings is a UFA, and that intrigued me. He's still 28, turning 29. I've always liked Juwan Jennings. I think he's a unrestricted free agent. And then what's going on in with Brandon Ayuk? What's going on with him?
Let me ask you this, though.
This
is an interesting segue.
Yeah.
When Brandon Ayuk ended, his time in San Francisco ended, I was immediately like, there's zero chance that guy's coming here with Sean McDermott as the head coach. Does that change with Joe Brady? Does your philosophy on that type of player, a player who seems to be disgruntled and who has worn out their welcome somewhere else? I've always kind of been like, yeah, that's a non-starter with Sean McDermott. Does that change with Joe Brady? Are they willing to take a flyer on a guy, or do you think it's very much the same, very culture specific? None of that changes.
Well, I think it could change, and I'll give you the example. Stephon Diggs. That's what happened. That's why they got him.
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs was traded to Buffalo because the story is Joe Shane saw the tweet that said maybe time for a change or something like that from Stephon. Yeah. He's like, hey, what's going on there? Got with Brandon Beane. They called, and he was disgruntled. And, now we're several years down the line from all the way it went with Stephon in Buffalo, but that's kind of how they got him in the first place was. So I wouldn't doubt that. I mean, we all know that, Sean runs a tight ship, so to speak, right? And there's a certain culture that he wants in his locker room, which is actually kind of a segue to what I wanted to talk about here, which is, look, I think one of the biggest things that's going to be different here is the vibe and the culture of the Buffalo Bills. This is not good or bad. Everybody has their own culture. That word gets thrown around, I think, too loosely sometimes. Culture doesn't have to be good or bad. It's just there has to be a buy-in to whatever your culture is for everybody. Sean McDermott was known as a grinder and really making sure he's really on top of every single detail. And I think over 9 years, what could happen is maybe that starts to wear on people here and there. Maybe that's why some coaches leave the organization. It also is a part of the reason they're so consistently successful as well. Joe Brady doesn't strike me as the guy that's going to be worried about every single detail of everything from that sense. And maybe more of the big picture. He's a high energy. He's a super positive kind of guy. And that's the vibe he's bringing into the locker room. We just had someone say, I didn't see any positive reviews from the players on this move. I don't know. Who have we talked to? Who have they talked to? I think the players do love Joe Brady, but I think that's a bit of a culture change you're going to see.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they'll be looser. I think that might help them down the road.
Correct.
That doesn't mean that this is definitely going to work, but I think that just naturally it will be a different energy and a different vibe. And I don't want to make it seem like lackadaisical because I don't think that's the case. I just think that, and this would have happened with anybody, but I feel like there was a lot of pent-up frustration and angst with Sean McDermott because of the shortcomings that they had as an entire team together. And, that's going to be stuff that you're going to hear about, and it's going to be out there for a long time now of like, why didn't it work with McDermott? Why did they ultimately move on? But I think it's just natural when somebody comes in, like somebody new comes in, it feels like a fresh start. It feels like a chance for some of these guys who maybe weren't on Sean's good side to make a positive impression. Maybe it's a chance, like as crazy as it sounds, maybe it's a chance for Keon Coleman to get a clean slate and a fresh start. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but it's just the first name that I thought of. So yeah, I feel like the culture remains intact and the framework and the foundation is very sturdy and strong. And a lot of that also has to do with Josh Allen. But I do think that this team will loosen up now. And at times, that might come back to bite them in the butt. Right. But I think at other times, it might help them.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. When we talked about who the Bills should, hire, one of the main talking points, which came out of last episode, and there was a video that we put out there from our talk, and I think it was a little taken out of context what we were saying about coaching Josh Allen hard. Neither of us are saying Josh Allen is, adverse to hard coaching. Not at all. It's the point was made by Ryan Fitzpatrick, and we discussed this, which is the next head coach shouldn't be someone who is, just overwhelmed or intimidated by coaching Josh Allen. It's got to be someone who's willing to be able to dig in with him and really have honest conversations with him. Eric Wood has said this many times about Sean McDermott. I love this quote about Sean McDermott. His quote is, Sean is very comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, right? I like that. That is my concern with Joe Brady here. And I'm not saying he is or isn't or can't. Joe Brady brings with him a very vibrant, high energy, positive personality, which is great. When vibrant, high energy personalities are faced with tough moments and crisis with people, I think that in a situation like a professional sports team is where your mettle gets tested to have those tough conversations.
Yeah, and that's going to be something that he's going to have to do. Like that's just the part of the job that will, and that doesn't even have to just be players. That can be coaches, that can be staff members, that can be when somebody makes a mistake, you are on the hook. I give people credit who are able to do that. Like that's personally not me. I'm not the most confrontational guy. I do not love to have those difficult conversations when things go wrong. But that comes with the job, and he is naturally
100%.
going to need to do that. There's for some reason, my mind got to this when you were talking about the last conversation we were having. The mindset that it's the most important game because it's the next game and we treat every game the same was so kind of like ingrained in our brains with Sean McDermott that I think at times it was a negative. And I want to know how Joe Brady handles that because I think that's nonsense. I've always thought that's nonsense. You do not treat a week 6 game against the Jets the same way you treat an AFC divisional game against the Denver Broncos. And I think there is something to be said about embracing the stage and the pressure that comes with these bigger games. And I feel like at times that's why they've been tight in those situations. I feel like because everything is the same, it's I don't know. It's just I don't want to contradict myself. It just feels like a fresh idea and voice in there will do them some good. I didn't think it was going to be this fresh voice because it's not fully a fresh voice, but it's at least a little bit of a different voice.
No doubt. I mean, judging by the temperature of the fans, it's not going over very well right now. It doesn't mean it can't. I'm not saying everybody. There's lots of fans. There's people right now chatting. We appreciate you getting in our chat box and our discussion here. There's some people who really like it. There's a person I read that said they like it because of Jim Leonard now. Otherwise, they wouldn't like it as much. But I think generally overall, this has not been the most super well-received hire by the Buffalo Bills. And as I said last week, though, folks, listen, I tweeted this out last week. At some point, the Bills are going to hire a coach. We're all going to debate if it's good or bad, which we're doing. They're going to hold a press conference. They're going to make people feel really good about some things that they say. And then the business of football will get on. And that's going to happen, Matt. No matter if it's Joe Brady or Sean McDermott was retained or Grant Udinski or Clint Kubiak came in here. A month from now, you and I are going to be in Indy. We're going to do the combine. We're going to be talking about the roster. Then it's going to be the owners' meetings. Then it's going to be the draft. Like the business of football is going to go on. It does not matter what anybody here thinks about this hire right now. What matters is what happens next year and the results on the field. So that gets me to, and I'm going to ask you, how much, like what has to happen here for Joe Brady to be considered a successful hire? Because he's in a position where I don't think if he gets anywhere short of the Super Bowl, people are saying that. Yeah, he almost has to.
They got to win, but I think you have to embrace that pressure that comes with it. Here's what I will say, and once again, like the word I used was uninspiring, so do not misconstrue my take on what I think this Joe Brady decision is. This decision is being much more well-received outside of the 716 area code and outside of the Buffalo Bills fan base. Like, I saw the clips from NFL Live today, and it was Marcus Spears and Dan Orlovsky and Mina Kimes talking about it. And I thought they all brought up really good points. But the one that stood out was Mina Kimes, and she was like, listen, Joe Brady is a very strong candidate a lot of places, and it feels very Liam Cohen-y, where, like, when he left Tampa, I think there was some real concern and regret that they let that guy out of the building, and the Bills didn't want to be the team that made that mistake with Joe Brady because it felt like if they let him out of the building, he was going to go and have a lot of success elsewhere. That fear should not force you into a decision, but if you think he is a rising star who is just scratching the surface of what he can become, then I understand it. The other thing is that if you just look at the resume and take the name off of it,
100%.
You would be like, this is a slam dunk for the
I was
Bills.
going to say that to you. What if you, if I just gave you a resume and I said, okay, here's a coach you can have. For the last 2 years, his team has ranked 4th and 2nd in points scored, 4th and 10th in yards. They've gone to the AFC Championship game, the AFC Divisional game. And, oh, by the way, he was running an offense that had the league MVP 1 year and then the leading rusher the next year. do you want him as your next head coach? I
Yeah.
think you'd say, oh my God, how's he available? But
Yeah.
because we know who he is, and because people are frustrated with the offense at times, and rightfully so, I think, at times, it feels different than doing that, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. So listen, like if you're critical of this decision, you have every right to be, and I totally understand it because I do think that a fresh voice would have made a lot of sense for the Bills. But I don't think it's destined to fail just because it is somebody who has been in the building. I think Joe Brady is a good coach. I have some concerns about the predictability of the offense, the lack of creativity, hey, on first down, they're going to run it and it's going to be a 2-yard gain. And then you're going to do it all over again. It's just like, I think back to the overtime of the Broncos game. And it was like, okay, I know there's something to be said about establishing the run, but the reason you had to take deep shots and convert on 3rd and longs is because you would not get outside of the mold that you had. I even joked earlier on X, I was like, for the sake of the bit, the first play offensively next year has to be a bubble screen. It has to. People would melt and it would be awesome. But yeah, I mean, like the next big thing is now that this decision has been made, go find a kick-ass defensive coordinator who can figure things out on that side of the ball. And if you do that, I think you are setting yourself up to have some success. And whatever success is relative because Terry Pegula even said it last week. Is success getting to the divisional round and winning games, but not getting to the Super Bowl? Or is success winning it all? That's the big picture of it all.
Joe Brady, the next head coach of the Buffalo Bills. We're going to wrap up here soon so people can get out and watch the Buffalo Sabres game here tonight. By the way, did you see the other news coming out of the NFL tonight, which is that Bill Belichick is not a first ballot Hall of Famer?
First thing I thought is like, are you a Hall of Fame voter?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to tweet, folks, I do not have a Hall of Fame vote, so don't blame this one on me.
Yeah.
Here's what I would say. I've long believed this, and I will continue to say it. I do not believe Bill Belichick is the greatest coach of all time. I do believe he is the most accomplished Hall of Famer, accomplished coach of all time, and therefore should be in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot.
Yes.
The Hall of Fame is about accomplishments, and he is the most accomplished coach ever. He should be in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. And if you ask me who is the best coach, I always say I think Joe Gibbs is. Joe Gibbs went to 3 Super Bowls with 3 non-Hall of Fame quarterbacks. He went to won 3. He went to 4 in like a 12-year period. Either way, yes, of course, Belichick is still a great coach and one of the greatest ever. But for him to not get in on the first ballot is interesting. And apparently, from the story I read, there are rumblings that Bill Polian was one of the people who left him off his ballot because he believes he needs to wait a year because of Spygate. And of course, Polian was directly affected by Spygate, being with the Colts at the time.
Well, you know, it's funny that a big day for a Brady was a bad day for a Belichick. Get it?
Yes.
Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get my joke? I thought that was funny.
I did.
Apparently,
you Joe Brady, not a Tom Brady. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. It was hey, maybe that's all the Bills have needed, a Brady to lead them to the promised land. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but yeah, maybe that's what they ultimately need. I think the Belichick stuff is so nonsensical and so stupid. Even if you don't think he's the best coach of all time,
right.
He
deserves to be in the, of course, 100%.
He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Like that's so stupid that we're even having this conversation that we are.
All right. I got a trivia question for you.
Okay.
What year was when did you really start following the Bills? Like what year did you start following the Bills?
Was born in November of 92, so I probably wouldn't remember much before like the early 2000s.
Okay, great. That's a great question. It's great. I'm glad you said that. Perfect. All right, Sean McDermott's first year in Buffalo. His first year as head coach, they went 9-7. Okay.
Yes.
Who's the only other Bills head coach in this century who in his first year full time won 9 games or more?
Is it Doug Marrone?
It is not. Doug Marrone went 6-10 his first year.
Oh, did he go 9-7 his second year?
He did.
Okay. Is it the year in 2004 when they lost in the Steelers game at the end of the? Was that? What coach was that? That was after
Buff Bills 83 has it.
It was Mularkey, right?
It was Mike Mularkey. Mike Mularkey is the only other coach to win 9 games his first year as Bills head coach this century. In fact, you go way back. Wade Phillips did win 10 his first year in 1998 after taking over from Marv Levy. And then you got to go way, way back for anybody to be able to do it in their first year. And that was 1966 with Joe Collier, actually. So it's very rare that a Bills first time head coach wins 9 games or more. But man, the expectation and the over under even for the Bills next year with Joe Brady's first year are going to be through the roof, way higher than that. It's going to be 11.5, 12 at least on the over under.
Yeah, but as we kind of saw this year, and I know it didn't equate to what we thought it might, the regular season, even if they win 10 games, if they go 10-7, but they're in the playoffs, his entire season will be based off of whatever success or lack thereof that they have if they get to the play. I mean, if they miss the playoffs, it is a disaster. It is a complete, utter disaster. You have Josh Allen as your quarterback. There is no world where that can happen. But if they do enough to get into the playoffs, because there will be growing pains, there naturally will be. There has to be. Like, they won 12 games this year. They've got a really hard schedule, at least by the looks of it, next year. So they'll probably regress. Like, that wouldn't be shocking. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure. But he knows that. He gets that. He's been here. He understands what's at stake.
Sabres Leafs tonight. We're going to let you guys get out of here. Watch that. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting watching the Sabres in this spot now, having important games. So I know I'm dialed into that. Matt is as well. Anything else that we left on the bone here? You want to say anything? What's going on this week? Oh, you're going to join me on WGR tomorrow. We're going to talk about this, right?
Yeah.
Can you still do that?
Yeah, I can still do that. That's
okay.
No problem.
So Matt's going to join me on the radio tomorrow. I'm on 10 to 12. Matt's joining me at 11 a.m. So we'll have this kind of discussion again, but a little bit more of advancing the story. Joe Brady will be introduced to the media Thursday at noon. What do you guys got going on here, and what are you talking about?
Yeah, we'll take it live. That's a big deal. So, if you are in the Buffalo area and you have Channel 7, we will put that on TV live for you right at noon, and then I'm sure we will stream it on all of our different platforms as well, so you can watch it in real time. I've already had a couple of people tweet at me like, you guys better ask these questions to Joe Brady. It's like, didn't we just do this? Like the tweets about you better ask hard questions. We just had that literally last week. And I thought, collectively, the people in the room did a good job asking some very tough questions that were uncomfortable for the people who needed to ask them at times, because that's just the reality of the situation. The only thing I want to close on is we talked a little bit about Jim Leonard, but that's not a done deal. That's right. Targeting him. If it's not him, Raheem Morris, would that be the name you'd look for? Or does it need to be a specific type of person?
I want to see what happens with the Jim Schwartz situation, how that plays out in Cleveland. I mean, I know he's still a candidate, but and I know they don't want him to leave, but they also have Todd Monken, who's still a candidate there. And I think a couple others who are still, I think Shieldhouse is a candidate there. I think, if I remember right. I want to see where that goes as well. That would be a guy I'd be on my radar, but yeah, Raheem Morris wouldn't be bad either.
What about offensively? I mean, I know I said that it's not as huge of a deal, but is there a name to keep an eye on?
I do think Davis Webb would see, because again, this is not a play caller. You put Davis Webb back in that room where Joe Brady was, with Davis Webb, with Josh Allen, with Mitch Trubisky, you put him back in that room. I think that's a really good room. Otherwise,
why would he leave Denver?
For the chance to go back to Buffalo to work with Josh Allen, which he loves Buffalo and Josh Allen. He's not going to call plays in Denver anyway.
I know. It's the same situation.
Right. I don't know if he would or he wouldn't. And I've said he could say, hey, look, I got Sean Payton here. I'm moving up the ladder. They're taking care of me. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that, but it's not like he's calling plays in Denver either.
I don't know much about Pete Carmichael, but I've seen his name thrown around a little bit. What's the backstory there?
I don't know. I'd have to go look and
I'd have to do some research. I've seen Pete Carmichael's name thrown around a little bit, and admittedly, I just don't know a ton about him.
Pete Carmichael is currently offensive assistant for the Broncos. So there you go.
So he could also potentially, I feel like he and Joe Brady.
He goes back with Brady to the Saints.
To New Orleans. He was the offensive coordinator in New Orleans from 2009 to 2022.
Wow.
Damn.
That's because Peyton was also there and calling plays. And then did he call plays after Peyton? I guess he might have been.
Maybe.
He could have done that. He was with the Saints since 2006, by the way. He was there.
Crazy. That's a crazy tenure for a coach.
I still say, though, I would keep an eye out for a guy like Ronald Curry to elevate to that position. I'm not sure if he, I know that wouldn't necessarily excite a lot of Bills fans, but he has been with Brady for a while. So I would wonder if that's the case as well.
He has. And I know that Ronald Curry is a very well-liked guy in that room. But at the same time, if you're going to keep if you're going to keep Joe Brady there, I feel like you need to bring in somebody from the outside for some fresh perspective. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Thanks a lot for tuning in again, live. Over 5,000 viewers here, 5,500 live viewers here. We are going to be keeping this, for everybody who missed anything, over at the YouTube page at Sal Sports. Thank you so much. We have surpassed 15,000 subscribers on YouTube. The last couple episodes, Matt, have done unbelievable numbers, over 12,000 viewers, over 10,000 viewers. We'd love to see that viewer count. We'd love to see your comments. We'd love to see your likes. And of course, if you're not watching, you can always listen, download, subscribe, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you pod. Matt's going to join me tomorrow on the Extra Point Show on WGR Sports Radio 550. You got him over at Matt_Bove and WKBW TV. You got me over at Sal Sports, and of course on WGR. I'll be on at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Enjoy the Sabres game tonight, buddy.
Yeah, you as well. We'll see how it plays out.